My name is France Vanstone. I'm a French-American artist. In lesson 1, we are going to explore the power of the pencil. Everything that the pencil can do in Procreate, we are going to explore together. So, how about we start? So the first thing that I would like you to see is the difference between a drawing made with the original pencil tool that comes with Procreate. For instance, the 6B pencil, which is a favorite of mine because it has a really dark stroke. The HB pencil is a little lighter, and just like as I draw on paper, I prefer softer lead. So what's going to happen is you're going to see a drawing made with a regular 6B pencil, the way it comes with Procreate. And then I will show you what the same kind of drawing, or what the same drawing for that matter, is going to look like with this 6B pencil tweaked, customized. And then after that, I'm going to show you how to customize your pencil. So let's get started. The first thing I like doing, so I'm going to put this thing in the gallery, and I probably am not going to keep it, is select a square canvas. I like the square because look, when you have a little bit of a split screen on the left with the original photo, you still have a big amount of real estate to play with. And what I'd like to do is select just the 6B pencil, and what we're going to do also is select not the black, because okay, black's nice, but how about like a brownish? This is kind of light, but it makes things a little more fun than just black. So I'm selecting a little bit of color. And what you're going to see right away is that I'm setting my thickness to the max and my opacity to the max as well. This is how I start every pencil drawing, with things pushed to the max. When I have a need to make things a little thinner, you're going to see it right away, but it's really not often. So let's do a little outline of this dog here to start with. Now, I'd like to draw your attention to the fact that what I'm doing now is extremely light. And that is why on that first stroke here, it went a little wide. And it went wide because I was going in that direction, not in that direction. So, I'm going to do a quick outline of this pup's face. This beautiful profile he's got. Again, don't really worry about resemblance or anything like that. What we're doing here is practicing using pencil strokes. Okay. I'm almost there. Actually, I'm noticing that I made the ear a little too small, so I'm going to come back here. Not even bothering to erase, frankly, because a lot of what's going to happen here in filling in is going to cover it up, really. Same here, I didn't make it long enough there. And that's really a lot of how I proceed when it comes to drawing with a pencil. I don't erase right away, I go with what I've got. Then eventually maybe, if I need to make corrections, I will. Okay, so what we've got here is a very normal outline done quickly. You see how quickly I did this with the regular 6B, the way it's set with Procreate. Now, whenever you use your eraser, it's always a good idea to have your eraser set the same way that you're drawing. So for example, here I'm under sketching, I'm using 6B pencil. This is what I'm using for my eraser too. That way it won't make marks that are totally foreign to the drawing, if you know what I mean. Okay, I'm just erasing what I did wrong here. Again, here I'm leaving things because whatever I add to it is probably gonna cover it up. Okay, now what I want to do is show you quickly with the 6B pencil that has not been tweaked at all, is that when you approach the surface of the iPad with your pencil a little bit slanted this way, not so much this way, you see what I'm doing? I'm slanting it this way so that the coverage is more on the side here than it is with the tip. Okay, so by doing this, I'm going to make broader strokes. Take a look. And they're a little loose too, but that's okay. See how broader they are? Because I need to deal with this darkness here that I have on the dog's ear. And I'm applying a little bit of pressure. See how broad this gets? And that's great because I don't want this to be too thin. I'm doing the broad strokes right now. And I'm going to approach the edge here kind of the same way. And being really vague with the information I'm giving here. Vague as in, I'm not going into all the little details. I'm not going into the thin strokes. What I want to show here is that when you start out, you can start with your pencil a little slanted. Not like this, because this would be a thin stroke. And you can add as much pressure as you want. Oop, I inadvertently picked white, so I need to go back to my color. And what I'm going to do for the ear and under the ear it's very dark. So here I can apply pressure. The way I'm drawing right now is by using a lot of the side here of the nib to create a white stroke and add it to this. I'm really adding pressure. So there. Okay, so again here we're about coverage and about quickly covering as dark as we can in a smaller amount of time. So my original here has a lot of darkness under the ear, even though the camera doesn't quite convey all the nuances of the values here, but that's okay. So here's some dark too. Okay, here's some darkness too. Again, using as wide a stroke as I can with the side here of the nib. Not completely, I'm not doing this, but I'm doing this. You see? But certainly not doing this. Just so you know. Let's undo this. Tap, tap, tap. Okay. Now what I'd like to show you with this 6B pencil, the original one, is that once I start cross-hatching, it's going to do something. Take a look. Here's my cross-hatching coming in. Well, hatching for now. There's not much cross going on. Okay. So take a look at this little phenomenon here that I found once I started using the 6B pencil a lot, and that I felt the need to change eventually. You will understand why. Did you notice that for each stroke that I make, especially when cross-hatching, let me delete this little guy here, especially when cross-hatching, it goes like this. Take a look. I'm doing this here so that you can see what's happening. First of all, did you notice that it goes from thin to thick? And as it gets thick, it also gets darker. If you notice, the top of my stroke is a little lighter than the bottom. This is the default setting of any pencil on Procreate. So what happens is that the beginning of the stroke is a little weak and the end is a little strong. I personally do not want that when I cross-hatch. When I cross-hatch with a pencil tool, I want it to do what my regular pencil does when I draw on paper, which is apply the same amount of pressure at the top as it does at the end, at the bottom of my stroke. And that's why I tweak my brushes. Okay? Let's get rid of this. You know that if you just hold down your two fingers, it just does a quick undo. Okay, let's just delete that last one. Okay, let me show you still what this looks like with the regular brush in Procreate. don't hesitate to press a little bit, because if you don't, you're really going to have some light strokes. So here I have a little bit of pressure going on, depending on how much darkness I want to achieve. But then again, it's doing something that, in my opinion, is not exactly true to a pencil experience. Okay? So you get the idea. You see how each stroke goes from thin to thick. It's okay, but it's not ideal. And really what we love about these tools, these digital tools, Procreate, is that you can customize, and the sky is the limit. You customize as much as you want. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get rid of all these last strokes, and I'm going to show you now what they look like if I do them with a tweaked 6B brush. But I don't want to get rid of this guy, so what I do is I take this to the gallery. I slide a little bit to the left, and I want to duplicate this. And now I've got my original here, and I'm taking this one, and that's the one I'm going to play with now. I'm going to erase some of this stuff here that I just drew. I'm going to take it out, because what I'm going to show you is how my customized brush behaves in comparison to the default one. Okay, so I've got the inside of this ear, and again what I want to achieve is cross-hatching that will convey the volume inside the ear. Alright, back to the brushes. I was using the 6B pencil, the default one. What I did, and I'm going to show you in a few minutes how I did it, but what I did is I created another 6B pencil that I called 6B Monkeyed With. I tweaked it. So I've got the original here, but I've got the one that I like better here. And let me show you how differently it's going to look. I'm selecting my color, my original color, and now I'm going to do the same thing as I did. I'm going to cross hatch. And I'd like you to look at how different those strokes are than the ones made with the original pencil. Let's bring a little darkness here. Do you notice something? That the strokes do not do what the original pencil does, which is start thin and end thick. In this new kind of setting, my strokes are pretty much the same at the top and at the bottom in terms of darkness and thickness. The thickness sometimes is unavoidable at the bottom. I'll tell you why, because you always pick up speed when you cross hatch. If you keep it somewhat steady, as I sometimes do, it doesn't get thicker at the bottom because it doesn't pick up speed with the thickness, or rather I should say it doesn't pick up thickness with the speed. Geez. So here you've got a pretty even stroke. And when I go like this also, did you notice? All right, again, speed, thickness. That's also a setting that you can play with. We're going to see that in a few minutes. Okay, let's get rid of these. Bing, bada, boom. Okay, now I'm back in my ear and I'm cross-hatching. Okay, adding some darkness here. But what I really like about this particular brush, the one that I tweaked, is that it is a little more predictable in terms of thickness and darkness. And now I don't use any blend with my finger ever. What I do instead is over my cross hatching, whenever I see that there are like elements that are missing, I come back with my pencil, and again with the side that will create a thick stroke, kind of like this. See, it's vague, it's very light, and I barely touch the screen here. I will add that here and darken inside the cross hatching so that you can still see those hatches, but you add a little bit of darkness. And then you add more hatches, in here, and a bit of darkness in there. Okay. And here we go. Now, the dog is far from being finished, but I need to talk to you about how we change the settings of a brush. Let's get rid of this, and let's get rid of that. So for the sake of comparison, what I did is bring these two dog drawings side by side. Remember, one was a duplicate of the other, except the left one is the one that I did with the default brush, the default 6B. And this one is the one that I made with the 6B that I tweaked. I put them side by side, and I can also show you how to do that because it's a very easy process on Procreate to take a drawing and copy it and paste it onto another canvas. So I prefer these strokes a lot more, but some of you might actually be more comfortable with the original setting. What I'd like to show you now is how to change the stroke that's original into something that you really like for yourself. Quickly, did you know that when you want to copy something out of Procreate, you can always select what you want to copy with the select tool here. So now you've got the thing ready, and what you can do is bring down 3 fingers on the screen, which brings up this, and you can select copy, which is what I'm going to do. Boom. So now it's somewhere on a clipboard. And then if you open a brand new canvas, let's go to the gallery. Let's open a new canvas. I'm going to make it square again. This is my favorite format. Now, when you slide down with 3 fingers only, it's going to bring back this little menu. And now you do paste. And boom, there it is. And now you can make it the size that you want. And this is how I made these two side by side. It's pretty neat, right? So now let's talk about how to tweak a brush so that it really responds the way you want. You've got a selection of brushes under sketching. You've got your technical pencil, HB pencil, 6B pencil, and so on. I am not one to use many tools when I draw. I usually stick to one because I like sketching. I like when things are fast. And I don't usually come back to a drawing. I usually do a drawing in one sitting. So what you want to do first, before you do any change, before you touch anything on a brush, you want to duplicate it. So what you do is you slide it to the left, and it's going to show you 3 options. Reset, which would put it back to the way it came with the app, which is exactly the way it is right now. Duplicate and share. Sharing is great because when you created a brush, you might want to send it to someone who's also using Procreate and be like, oh, look, I really like the way, blah, blah, blah. But what we're interested in here is duplicate. You want to duplicate anything before you do anything with it. So boom. And now did you notice I've got 2? And what I do now with my duplicate is I'd like to maybe create a different folder in which I'm going to put my new brushes that I created myself. So I've got my duplicate of the 6B pencil, which is the one that I'm going to monkey with. But I would like to have a folder in which I'm going to put it so that I know where my personal brushes are. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a folder. Drag 1 finger on here and a plus sign will appear. This plus sign is what will allow you to create a new set. Let's call it tweaked, because these will be tweaked brushes. Tap outside, there, it's created. But right now, that's the one that's selected. Did you notice? It's blue, which means that's the folder. It's empty. But what I want to do is bring this duplicate of 6B pencil inside the tweak folder. So all you do is drag it and make sure that it goes into tweaked. Let me see if it will do it. Sometimes it's a little tricky. Okay. Oh, sorry, I put it in favorites. So I'm going to slide it out of favorites and put it into tweaked. There. Now I've got my duplicated 6B pencil brush in my folder that I like, where I'm gonna save all the brushes, even if it means different versions of the same brush, but maybe ones that I need to play with a little bit to know what my comfort level is. Now let's tap on it, and it's gonna show you all the different options that you have. One thing you need to know right away: did you know that this little rectangle here at the top is a rectangle where you can test drive your brush? So you can draw on it to try what you just did. Every new stroke replaces the previous one. It's a great little thing because you avoid having to close this, try it on the white thing. It really is a waste of time. So using it white on black is actually a really good way to know how your brush is behaving. Okay, so let's start tweaking this brush. This is mine and this is ours. So I'm going to tap on it. Did you notice that at the bottom here you have an option that says stroke? We're going to tap on that. And here I would like to bring all the sliders to the left. This will cancel the whole concept of taper. That is important to me because when I cross hatch, I don't want to have a weak beginning and a strong end. I like the beginning and the end of a stroke to look the same. So you see, these strokes are very much the same. And if I go like this, it gives you a pretty good idea of how the thickness stays the same. Oops. Okay, again, trying it out white on black. I personally like that because I think this is a closer experience to the original pencil on paper. Next, the shape. I like keeping the shape as is. I really have not found that tempering with a lot of these things does me any good, so I personally do not change the shape itself. But what I like is playing with the grain. Now here, what's going to happen is it is set at scale at 29.3%. It doesn't mean much unless you start playing with that percentage. And what's going to happen is once you start playing with it, so this is a regular one. When you start monkeying with it, did you notice what happens here? The scale either becomes bigger or smaller. I like that percentage to be higher because it gives more texture to the stroke. And it imitates the texture of paper. You know when paper has a little bit of tooth? This really renders that beautifully on the screen. Take a look. You see this? And if I add even more, that makes even more texture. But I don't want it to be too much, so I'm going to bring it to about 60%, 60.2. There you go. Now, this is a matter of personal preference. If you don't like having all this texture, then bring it back to as tiny as possible. It will not show as much texture, but it can be just as beautiful. It really is what you prefer. You see the difference here. I like about 60. Okay? Because for me, that really replicates the experience of a pencil on a piece of paper with tooth. I also personally like the feel of the original pencil brush before the newest update of Procreate. So I do not go with improved grain filtering, I go with none, and I like that. But again, if you want to go with improved and try to see what it looks like compared to none, go ahead. There's also classic. You really would have to play with that to see what it looks like. I don't think there's a huge difference, but I like no filtering whatsoever. And talking of previous versions of Procreate, a lot of people have said that they prefer the previous shapes of the brushes. In order to do that, if you want to go back to the previous ones, classic is the way to go. I don't mind improved. I think it's a beautiful thing, the way things are now, but you have the option of reverting if you want. I am going a little bit back and forth, and I'll tell you why. We just did the grain, and I told you that I like the scale to be a little bigger to create a texture. That to me goes very well with the jitter, and the jitter is found on the stroke. Did you notice here that by default it's set to the minimum? I like a little bit of jitter. Let me tell you why. Right now when I do this, did you notice that yes, there's texture inside, but the edges of my strokes are very clean. That's fine, but I like a little bit of messiness, and how I create this is by adding a little bit of jitter. Now look at what happens to my stroke. It's a little less clean, and to me that replicates really well the way a pencil behaves on a paper that has a little bit of tooth. I like that. You don't have to like it, but that's how I set my brush preferably. I put 27.8. I can actually go to 30. Okay, 30.9. But if you really want it jittery, you're getting something like this. Now I think we're moving away from what a pencil stroke looks like, but if that's what you like, go for it and see what it looks like. I personally will keep it at about 30. Okay? And that way it's just a little messy enough on the edges to create a really realistic stroke. Now let me explain something about streamline. I keep it set to the nothing, to the none. And I'll tell you why. Because the moment you engage streamline, first of all, let's get rid of this. Let me make you a new stroke. Okay, let's do it, for example, 63%. What this does, did you notice that it picks up your stroke and sort of guides it? I personally have no use for this feature. A lot of people like that in calligraphy, for instance. It really makes for some really perfect shapes. I'm not a fan because I am not a fan of perfection to begin with when I draw. So I cancel streamline altogether. And that way, what I draw is what I draw. And what ends up on the surface of the iPad is exactly what my hand intended. Under dynamics, I have not touched anything. Wet mix, glazed, or normal, I go with normal. Opacity dynamic, okay, the speed might add a little bit of opacity. If you want the speed to make things way darker, this is where you want things to go. I'm not unhappy with a little bit of darkness coming with speed, because that's really what a usual pencil does. I don't touch anything else. I love it, but that's me. Now let's go to pencil. The pencil here, menu, is going to bring us a lot of options. I personally like a lot of opacity when I draw. And that's why I play with a 6B pencil to begin with. Because I like the fact that you can really achieve some dark. So I like the opacity to work. The bleed I have not touched. The size I also like when the pencil gets wide as I go fast or when I put pressure. So yes, I like this to be set to a big size. Softness, that really replicates the softness of a lead. I personally like this to be set at about 50%. But again, once you start drawing and you find it too fuzzy, you want to come back a little bit. I like a little bit of softness. This, the Apple Pencil tilt, is going to determine how your stroke is going to behave according to the tilt of your pencil, right? I would like you to take a few moments, take a few minutes, take an afternoon for that matter, to play with all these settings, because this is really going to impact the way your strokes are going to start and the way they're going to look, depending on the tilting of your pencil. We all hold our pencils differently, and whether you hold it a little bit like this or more like this is going to have a huge impact on the way your strokes are going to look. So in other words, before you even start drawing anything, a portrait of a dog or a portrait of a person, play with these settings a little bit. Take the time, take a few minutes, take a few hours, and really see what works best for you. And once you've found a comfort zone, take that and save it as a brush. And then maybe you're not going to like that so much after a week. Keep it, duplicate it, and monkey with that. And that way you haven't totally lost the settings that you've just saved with this one. And last but not least, under the general setting, you really want to pay attention to how big you want your brush to be. For size limits, I mean really, if it's 8%, 7.8, that's plenty. But if you want this to go a little bigger, you can make thicker strokes. But then it's starting to look a little bit like charcoal. I like keeping this at about 8 or 9%. And now I've got a decent brush to play with. It's got a nice size. And as I put more pressure and as I go faster, it's darker and thicker. I have never imported my own shape and my own grain for any brush, but you can. You can do that. You have the option of inserting a photo for this, inserting a photo for the grain. I like the original settings. I think they're great. I hope you've enjoyed exploring Procreate's pencil tool. Now you can watch me put it into action during this time lapse. And as always, I can't wait to see what you create yourself.